I think that adoption cycle, which occurs not only with Bitcoin, this is a human adoption cycle. We come in waves. That's just how we're built. But it mimics mycelium. And when conditions are absolutely perfect, temperature, humidity, various different things, that mycelial network concentrates its energy right below the surface, produces a mushroom, and within just a couple days, the mushroom pops out of the ground, drops little spores, which are little mushroom seeds to reproduce, and then that mushroom organism dies down really quickly. Those little spores blow in the wind, they land somewhere else, and if they land in a good spot, they regrow a new mycelial network and the cycle continues.
That's exactly what happened. Like, these spores were continuing to spread, and I was a spore that landed in 2020. I have these really interesting talks that I feel take us in these different directions, which I love. But
that's the most Bitcoin thing ever, by the way. As I was gaining confidence that I should even publish this thing, at the time, people were not comparing Bitcoin to a living organism. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. I'm wearing my mushroom hoodie.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. I bought it in San Diego a couple years ago, and I was like, I have to wear it today when I talk to you. So
I am honored. What's your accent from, by the way? Where are you from?
I'm from Chicago.
Okay. I was going to say, I smell a little Midwest on you. That is great.
Yeah. Where are you from?
Minnesota.
Oh, okay. Great.
Exactly.
Where are you living in Minnesota now?
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb and then went to school at the U in Minneapolis and then traveled for 5 years a bit after school. And then wife and I came home, got married, had one kid, hopefully more soon, and just moved to the suburbs during COVID time. But we're like 4 miles from the city.
Okay. Yeah, that's real close.
Exactly. Enough to get a proper yard and some nature, but still close enough.
Yeah, that's nice. You don't want to be too far away from doing fun stuff and getting out there.
That's right. For now, at least. We'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see when it gets busier with more kids, so things change a little bit. So I really am excited you're here. I've been a big fan of yours since I pretty much learned about Bitcoin. Like, I saw your article about Bitcoin being the mycelium of money, and I see that you work for Swan. You have your Swan hat on. So
Indeed.
what do you do for Swan?
Yeah, I started 5.5 years ago at Swan. I was one of the first employees outside of the founders, and I came up through the marketing org. So I built our email marketing program, marketing automation, a bunch of different marketing stuff. And then about a year ago, a little bit more, I started overseeing some of our inside sales and kind of our go-to-market for some of our premium products. And then soon after that, I became VP of operations. So I oversee client services, operations, onboarding, and kind of plug in the middle of our company across the different departments. So kind of taking my early experience and applying that to client experience. That'd probably be the easy way to describe it. So I know way too much about how fiat banking works, working with our custodians. And my goal overall is just to make sure we have a world-class client experience.
That's amazing. So was your journey always in marketing before this, and then you found out about Bitcoin and then decided to look for a company to work for?
Yeah, good question. So going way back, I was typical middle-class Midwestern upbringing, very into sports, but uniquely, I was very into bass fishing as well. I saw you said some question about weird stuff about me. We can go into that if you want.
Yeah, something people don't know about you.
That's right. But also, I was like a little entrepreneur hustler from a young age. So constantly in the neighborhood, making a lemonade stand or washing cars, I probably had 100 businesses before I was 18, little micro businesses. And so, which is pretty weird, right? Kids want to play and I'm out there scheming. Like, I dug a pond, raised fish, thought I could sell fish sandwiches. This is a horrible idea. But I ran through all these cycles, and I share that because that's how I see myself, as just an entrepreneur or problem solver or something like that. And so I took that into college. I ran our school newspaper ultimately at the end of my college career. And then I went into sales at Oracle. So I did about 4 years selling enterprise software to large companies. And that was a good experience for me. I thought it was sort of the peak of what I was supposed to do. Like, I finally made it. My life was building up to this moment. And on the outside, it looked like I was doing really well, making lots of money, winning the awards, blah, blah. But on the inside, I was kind of thinking, this can't be what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. How did I build myself up to this moment? And at the time, I was being groomed for a promotion there. I went out to Denver to meet with the new team. And I sort of had this, why my camera's acting all weird.
Is
I had
it?
this like come to Jesus moment, for lack of better terms, where I realized that the path I was on, I didn't want to be on anymore. So I essentially went home, went through a full intensive yoga teacher training while working at Oracle. And during that experience, I sort of saw two paths. I have like the sales path, which was, it suits me in many ways, but I see the downsides of it. And then I had this yoga path, which was, poor and happy versus rich and sad, to keep it super simple. And through that experience, I sort of gained the confidence to say, hey, maybe I don't need to just go barreling down this identity that society's built for me. Maybe I can change a little bit and do something of my own. And so my girlfriend at the time, now wife, we sold everything we owned and bought a one-way ticket to India. And prior to that, slight tangent, is I smoked DMT for the first time, met God. God told me to follow your bliss, to keep it cheesy and tight. There's much more to that story. Anyways, sold everything, one-way ticket to India. And then from 2014 through 2018, we were traveling all around the world, working remotely and just building online businesses. And our core business was teaching business skills to wellness entrepreneurs. So think you're a yoga teacher and you want to run a retreat and you need a website, you need to learn how to market yourself, stuff like that. So we built online courses and consulting and all that stuff. And then I found Bitcoin in 2017. And I quickly realized that I need to focus everything here. And so I essentially outsourced myself out of the business. I just did payroll and very little things just to keep the ship going. And luckily it was cash flow positive. So my wife and I didn't have to work during this period. And I just studied and built some knowledge and then sort of worked on a career transition into the space. So all of 2018 and most of 2019, I worked all kinds of nonsense jobs in the industry. I had a consulting firm for a while, mostly telling traditional businesses that no, you do not need a blockchain for that. They would pay us a bunch of money for a fancy report. At the end, it's like, no, don't put a blockchain on that, which is kind of funny. Sold a bunch of products for different companies, did some writing, whatever. Then I met Corey at Bitcoin 2019 conference in San Francisco, which was amazing conference. And we had a chat about his new company, which was called Give Bitcoin at the time. The thesis was, if you gift someone some Bitcoin and you teach them about it, over time, having some skin in the game will lead them to appreciate what they own and ultimately self-study. That was the thesis.
I love
And
that.
and I joined that company, Give, as a consultant advisor for Corey to build marketing automation tools. And building that wellness education platform was essentially me learning the full digital marketing stack just due to necessity. I had to build a business. So I learned everything about a business in the digital sense there. And Corey liked some of those principles on marketing automation, because we had a large business with very few employees, and you can use software to leverage yourself. And so Corey said, hey, come do that for Give. And I was dying to work for a proper Bitcoin company, so I jumped at the opportunity. And maybe 3 months after I joined the company, we hit pause on Give and we built Swan. And the reason is because many of our clients were using our gifting platform to set up gifts to themselves. So we watched our clients create a DCA plan for ourselves by bootlegging our core product on gifting. And we're like, oh, people just want a DCA. Oh, the brokerage model for Bitcoin is way bigger than gifting. So we threw gift away, built a brokerage platform, and then later rebuilt the gifting product we originally founded just in our portfolio of products. And so I don't even remember the beginning of your question, but in terms of skills, I had the digital marketing skills. I had a successful sales career prior. I'm just a problem solver, high agency. I like business stuff. And so that's kind of the story there.
I love the whole journey. I have a bunch of questions based on what you just said, but I love that you took that idea, you looked at what your clients wanted out of the product, and you built Swan out of that. That's amazing. And then you incorporated it back in. I think it's really interesting about how you decided to quit everything, go to India with your girlfriend at the time. And it's funny because when people discover Bitcoin, sometimes they discover spirituality or something, or they just want to be free, or just rethink their life. But it seems like you had that idea first because you were going to meditation, yoga, and then you decided to take that trip to India. And I'm curious about the awakening experience that happens, because I've heard a lot of people that do psychedelics or something, that a lot of people that I know that have done it, they've gotten to that point where they see God, like you mentioned, and stuff. But you were already kind of awakened before that. You decided to take this big journey and you did that. I'm curious about that experience a little bit, because I've never done that. I have microdosed, which I find incredible, because it feels like you have a little sensation of what it might be like, but you're fully aware, of everything. So, but I always find that amazing that people have this awakening, or you feel like you see God. Like that's really fascinating to me. And I don't know what DMT is. What is that like a
Yeah, so DMT, it's a molecule that's very similar to serotonin, and most of the psychedelic drugs, the classical ones, are all acting on your serotonin receptors. And so the hardware in our brain is ready to receive those serotonin molecules. So think like the geometry of a molecule, it just plugs right in. DMT looks just like a serotonin molecule with just some slight tweaks. And so our human hardware is ready to take in DMT in replace of that serotonin in the receptor site. And DMT is found naturally all over the world in every single ecosystem. It's found in all different types of plants at various different ratios. It's still a mystery as to why plants produce DMT, but it does exist. And psilocybin, the active ingredient in quote magic mushrooms, that also looks just like DMT. And so again, serotonin molecules. What's unique about DMT is that it's by far the most powerful substance. And so you don't need a lot, and your waking reality changes almost immediately. Most people smoke it. There's other ways you can. Ayahuasca is
I've
DMT
heard
and
that.
another plant that you drink. So you take it through your stomach instead of smoked. You can inject it, which I've never done, but there's a bunch of science in London right now where they're putting DMT in an IV, and they're putting people in that DMT state for extended periods of time. If you smoke it, it comes on in like 30 seconds, and maybe 15 minutes later, you're totally back to baseline, feet on the ground, maybe half an hour max, and you're totally normal. And that's one interesting thing. It's analogous to skydiving. It's the skydiving of psychedelics. It's fast and it's intense, which often means it's hard to pull back artifacts from the experience because it's so fast. It's so hard to grasp what you're seeing. It feels like you just broke the consciousness or broke reality open and you're seeing behind the matrix.
And you're trying to
That's how I would
process it,
describe
but
it.
it's so fast, so you're like, wait, what just happened?
That's right. And yeah, I had an experience where I met a godlike figure. We're communicating telepathically, and this godlike figure starts. Well, let me back up. Black astral plane out to infinity. I'm outside some event. I'm just sitting on my couch in my living room, eyes closed, sitting, but I see a black astral plane. I'm
Was
outside this.
anyone was anyone with you guys? Did you do it by yourself or with your girlfriend or your wife?
A buddy of mine was there.
Okay.
Yeah, we just took turns and watched each other while the other person went. And anyways, black astral plane out to infinity. I feel like I'm in outer space. Then I see this Coliseum carnival event. Okay, then there's all these people out making like a tunnel in front of the event, kind of like football, you're running through the tunnel to start the game. And then all these lesser beings are in the tunnel deliberating whether or not I should be let in this event. He's not ready. Oh, let him in. At the end of the tunnel was the godlike figure with like 100 arms, narrow insectoid head, holding this giant book, sitting in full lotus, looking at me, and he's communicating telepathically. I'm sitting there like, and he starts laughing, and the god is like, Brandon, you're so funny, worrying about your job and your relationship, all those silly human things. Look what I can do. And he starts singing shapes and colors into existence. And he's like, don't worry about all that kind of stuff. You're a human. This is amazing. You should go enjoy your human life, maximize your gifts, chase your bliss. Essentially, the most stereotypical takeaway ever. Like, do what you love. That was more or less the message. But at the time, it was potent message for a 23, 24, 25-year-old, something like that. And it helped me remove the need to go fulfill my external destiny by society and instead pursue something that was more meaningful to me. Of course, I can always go back to a software sales job. That's no problem. So yeah, took the leap there. That was the DMT experience.
I feel like I wish I could have some kind of, if there was AI that could take all your words and put it into like an AI video, just so you can like see what you saw, or just kind of to put that into,
I would
because
love
I'm
that.
imagining the insectoid head and like, 100 arms or something. And it's just
Oh
crazy.
yeah. One more addendum to that story. Experience done. That was my major takeaway. Probably less than 5% of the experience, but that's what I took out. Next guy goes, I'm just sitting there meditating totally straight in my head. And I'm meditating. All of a sudden, I end up visualizing like on a little beach bungalow somewhere in Thailand or something like that. And I'm in a little covered roof on my patio out on the beach, pouring rain. I look onto the beach and there's this Jamaican looking dude, skinny head, sitting in full lotus, staring at me, just pouring rain on him, but he doesn't mind the rain. He communicates telepathically with me and said, yeah, I know what I said to you. I know you heard it, and I'll be watching. I just got goosebumps saying it.
Yeah, I've gotten goosebumps a couple times.
So I'm totally straight in my living room and I hear that message. Like, what a powerful thing. Probably 3 months after that, I was just on cloud nine. Like, reaffirmed my mission in life, how life is beautiful, how I'm on the right path. All that came out of that. And again, help me make that decision to sell everything and move on with life.
That's crazy because people are so stuck in their problem, their things they're worried about in life, and they're too focused on that stuff. And when you see something like that, you think, wow, the universe is massive. I don't even know what other dimensions there are, what this whole existence is, and then you see that and you realize these problems are small. This is just a playground for us on earth to just have
Yes,
fun with it and enjoy our life and, chase our passions and be creators and create the life we want to live.
that's right.
So I want to kind of ask you because of that background, I love the idea. Like I have these thoughts about how finding out about psilocybin and mushrooms and how it's the same idea as DMT, but how we are closer to a mushroom in DNA than I think a mushroom is to other plants or something like that. Like
That's
I'm not
right.
exactly sure. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
No, so then I was just thinking about how, you've talked about these decentralized systems and how, how mycelium works and how Bitcoin is like that. But I also feel like it's something that makes you think that because this chemical or this naturally occurring thing can affect our brains and we are so close in DNA to mushrooms and to things that create that effect. It's like just like how it can reshape forests and create these systems and shape the world. It's almost like this is my insane idea, but I'm sure it's like has some sort of basis. But it's like the mushroom is reshaping our consciousness to kind of look for solutions to be free and to like reshape the world to a better place. It's kind of weird. It's like a crazy thought, but it just feels like why would it play such a role in awakening us in a good way?
I
These
agree.
it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't, no one knows why, but if you just look at what results from ingesting psilocybin and you look at what role those mushrooms play in our ecology today, it does start to paint a pretty compelling story. So I'll answer two questions. One, the similarities biologically, and then also what role does psilocybin play in ecology today with humans? So first off, if we rewind a long time ago, all life was in the ocean. It started there. Then ultimately we colonized land, and after we came to land, then we had the age of dinosaurs. Okay, then we had the meteor hit, age of the reptiles go down, age of the mammals comes up. That's still where we are now. And throughout that, there was many other extinction events, just like the one that took out the dinosaurs. Every time there's an extinction event, world's in chaos, most of the living organisms die. But in those conditions, fungi have been shown to be the inheritors of the earth. As a kingdom, fungi is separate from plants and animals. It's more diverse than plants and animals. There's more species, and they have all these different incredible ways to survive. Okay, and they essentially rebuild life on the planet. They work across different kingdoms and they use trees for their advantage, they use plants for their advantage. And so they're kind of a collaborator archetype in our system. And they seem to want to have a healthy planet because they're doing things that make the planet better. Okay. Then you fast forward a little bit more, and now humans have psilocybin. We have this thing. What does it do to us? It makes us better leaders. It makes us more empathetic. It makes us care more about the environment. It makes us more conscious of our actions and a lot less neurotic. So in a way, it puts us back into our body, our old brain, our limbic system, which is the intuition. That's the gut feeling. There's a lot of wisdom in that part of our body. However, we also have this neofrontal cortex, our new brain, for higher processing, reasoning, language, etc. And that's an incredible thing we have. However, it's also so powerful that it can fool us into doing things. We can have an overactive mind. We can have self-destructive behavior and have a hard time changing it. And introducing psilocybin often allows you to take a step back and say, hey, wait a minute, those behaviors are destructive, and it's clear to me in this state. Maybe when I'm down from this experience, I can go fix my life a little bit more and be a better person for myself, for those around me. And that creates a tremendous positive effect for those who have those experiences. And yeah, it makes you care about the environment more. It makes you believe in something larger than yourself. It makes you view ecology, nature, whatever, as something more than just individual organisms, right? You kind of do feel the ecology there. And we emerged out of this thing. We are of this thing. And so it's a mistake to believe that just because we're clever monkeys, it doesn't mean we're separate from nature. We are of this thing. And so, yeah, I think it puts us a little bit more in balance with our ecology. That's how I see that. And one more I forgot to mention was, how are we more like a fungi than plants? So if you look at the taxonomy, right, we started with like bacteria, and then it evolves, and you essentially fork into this taxonomy branch, all these different kingdoms and whatnot. So humans, let me back up. Plants and mushrooms separated on this taxonomy. Mushrooms inhale carbon dioxide, exhale oxygen. Fungi are the opposite. They inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, just like us. So now we have plants and fungi, and then fungi broke off from plants, or plants broke off from fungi is a better way to say it. And the difference is fungi have external stomachs and animals have internal stomachs. So fungi use chemistry and a series of one cell wall tubes called mycelium to burrow inside their food. They put themselves in the food, and then they use chemistry to digest the food, where we put food in us and we use biology in our guts to pull the nutrients out. And so that's the main difference. It's, that happened a long time ago, so I don't want to overstate how similar we are to mushrooms, but most people consider mushrooms like a subcategory of plants. They think about button mushrooms or psilocybin or the emoji or whatever. Yeah, that's that one.
That's so fast. I feel like there's so many amazing things about that entire system, and I could listen to just so many more facts about that all day. I feel even after we're done with our conversation, I want to go learn about mushrooms more. But I think that it's crazy about what you said with how they have the external stomach. And that's why, we'll talk about this more too, but about how the Bitcoin is the mycelium of money because it has that external stomach. That's where my mind is going with that. So thank you for connecting those ideas. The one thing that you said about the environment, caring about the environment, even with the microdosing I've done, the little bit that I've done, whatever, every time I've done it, I find myself more like the nature is more beautiful. I want to be outside more. I want to go take walks. I feel like I'm connected to nature somehow. Like I look at the flowers and I appreciate them, and I'm looking at the trees swaying. It's just everything just seems prettier, and you just want to be outside more, and you want to be more creative. And it's such a crazy thing because it's not a full trip or anything like that, but it just does make you want to gravitate back towards nature. And I also saw some kind of documentary about psilocybin, and I think it was about all types of like acid and different things, that was talking about how, I don't know what year it was, in the 60s or something, where a lot of people were doing these types of hallucinogenics, and they used to actually use them to help people recover from addictions. Like it was used for Alcoholics Anonymous, until they decided to outlaw it or make it like illegal or something. So there were studies that showed that it did help people get back to nature, get out of destructive behaviors. So it's just funny how that's such a good thing for people that I don't know why it's been suppressed. I don't get that.
Yeah, I think in the 60s, when we ultimately made those things illegal, I think the state was sort of overreacting to the social climate at the time. A lot of people were protesting Vietnam, advocating for civil rights. The quote unquote hippies were kind of taking over society a little bit, and our government didn't want that countercultural social force. And so how do they stop it? Well, they infiltrated all these groups. They had plants in all of them trying to disrupt them from the inside. And similar to how they took down Black Panthers and stuff like that, they just found the easy path, which was associate them with drugs, which was happening. And it's very easy to scare people in society by saying, hey, these drugs are scary. Look at what it's doing to people. Make up some lies. And then you sway public opinion, make everything illegal. And then rather than going after them for, hey, we don't like your social movement, They can just say, hey, we don't like this because of the drugs. And that was just a convenient way for them to pin down that social.
Plus, more people were thinking about the idea of freedom, and we don't want to go fight in this war, and we're not going to go, kill each other. We love all people. Like, everyone was so loving, and it was like this great movement of that it was almost like the government that wants you to go risk your life and go fight for something that you don't believe in. Why would they want you to be awakened to the fact that you don't want to fight? So it's kind of
That's
to
right.
suppress that decentralization and that idea of people caring. It's like put them into a fear-based mode and control people by not allowing them to open their minds and see what's really out there, instead of your little fear world that they put in your mind.
That's right. One
So
more on this
yeah.
one though. It is more complicated. The psychedelic, the people who are supportive would say this was a glory period and the bad guys took us down. But the reality was people were consuming large amounts very often, and it is a very destabilizing experience. And so for healthy people who know what they're doing and they intentionally consume these things, they're powerful tools.
Right.
But if you just distribute them broadly and there's no social scaffolding or tradition or guardrails around it, it can cause issues. Many people will discover something in that experience and then continually go back to the experience when the real work is done after. The experience itself just gives you perspective, and then it's on you to actually integrate what you learn to make yourself better. And so many people, especially today, their psychedelics are having a resurgence. And in culture today, I see a responsible path and a very irresponsible path. And so I wouldn't say that these are indiscriminately good things for all people. They should be treated with the utmost respect. And if we go back to that era, there was kind of two points of view. One point of view is dose everyone, because even if it's hard, it will make the world better. That's sort of the Timothy Leary approach. He's like, let's put LSD in the water supply. And then there's the Aldous Huxley approach, which is these are powerful tools. They shouldn't be for mainstream society. They should be for the people on the vanguard of society, the artists, intellectuals, academics, musicians, the type of people who maybe can handle that experience and can integrate it. And that's probably 80% of the social value, is having the minority of people go into those and bring back artifacts to make our world better.
Well,
And
that's
I'm
totally.
way more on the Huxley side, not indiscriminate use. It doesn't make sense, really.
Yeah, and I remember, and I'll move on to, our actual, what I really have our bullet points on the conversation, but this is what happens. I feel like I have these thoughts about how I want the podcast to go, but then we have these really interesting talks that I feel take us in these different directions, which I love.
That's
But
the most Bitcoin thing ever, by the way. We're all nerds with all these different rabbit holes. Like, very few Bitcoiners, their first rabbit hole is Bitcoin.
mhm.
Usually we're perpetual rabbit hole dwellers who just found a deeper, more interesting one and we latch on here. But I don't know many Bitcoiners that are super boring, but then also like Bitcoin. It just doesn't seem to
Right,
happen.
and that's why it's so fascinating talking to all different people, and even not knowing anything about them before you get on, because finding out what their past was, what they were curious about, like what they were like as a kid, like you said, just all these things people might not think they're that interesting, but all your nerdy curiosities or any kind of weird thing you were into is why it's so fascinating and how you found Bitcoin.
Totally agree.
But one of the things that I remember seeing on an episode of Joe Rogan was something about that mad honey, that he had some guest on that brought back mad honey. And he was talking about the culture around there where the people that go collect it, I forgot what country it is. I don't know. I'm good at like knowing stories, but not actual facts. Like I can't, contain the real facts about it. But the people that live in this country that collect this honey from these mountains that are really dangerous to climb and bring it back, it's like they've done it. Like a lot of the people in the place in that country have done it, but they've only done it once. Like they're like, yeah, I did it. I got what I need to get out of it, but they're not like constantly doing this. It's not something in their culture where they're like, we're just using this honey all the time because we want to constantly be in that state of mind. It's like a one and done. Like they have this awakening and they move on. So it's a responsible. So I think that's where you're going with that. Like people, if it's a cultural thing or if it's something in society where people realize if you're going to do it, and I'm not going to say that they've all done it. Maybe only 20% of people. I'm not sure, but the people that have done it, they don't go back and continue. So that's a really good point that you made. And I think it is great that people that are ready to explore, like the intellectuals you said, or the artists and those types of people that want to open up their experience, and then they could bring back and spread that to the rest of society. It's a really cool idea. So I want to go to our first actual question. In your essay, you compare Bitcoin to a pioneer species in nature, tough, resilient, laying the groundwork for new whole ecosystems. So that idea, when you were in Swan already? Like, was that something you've been thinking about for a long time? Were you interested in that ecosystem and then connected it once you found Bitcoin?
Yeah, good question. So, two essays I wrote about ecology. The first one, Mycelium of Money, that started in 2018. And then Pioneer Species, I published maybe 2021. I don't remember for sure, but sometime around that era. Both very similar lenses to view Bitcoin. Mycelium of Money was broadly about Bitcoin. Later, I got really interested in mining, and I started seeing the parallels with Pioneer Species. And so I consider them of the same perspective, but Mycelium of Money came maybe a year after I fell down the rabbit hole, way before Swan, a year or so more before Swan. And I was living in Bali at the time. This was sort of the tail end of our digital nomad era. And I was going to all the meetups, really excited about stuff. And I went to a meetup and I saw a graphic about the Lightning Network and all the nodes and the connection points in the network, and it looked like a rough sketch of a mycelial network. And if we back up a second, the majority of fungal organisms' life is spent in a state of in the mycelial state, which is a one cell wall root structure. It's a bunch of tubes, essentially underground, very, very, very small. And those tubes connect trees, they trade resources, they communicate across species lines. They do all this crazy stuff to help our ecosystems. And yeah, that's the primary state these things are in. And so I saw a graph of the network. It looked like mycelium. Connections started to form. I drive my little scooter home from the meetup back to the villa in Bali. I go nuts that night. Ideas flowing out of nowhere. I don't even know where they're coming from. And I'm writing down in a journal. And that was the majority of the first part of that essay I wrote that night, or at least the ideas were written down, rewritten, blah, blah, blah. But that's when that one came. And I sat on it for probably 5 to 7 months as I was gaining confidence that I should even publish this thing. At the time, people were not comparing Bitcoin to a living organism. It was mostly finance this or Austrian economics or some sort of technology angle. And Dan Held had published an essay that year comparing the genesis of Bitcoin and Satoshi to sort of like a gardener who cultivated this thing. And I'm like, okay, there's a little bit here. I connect with Dan. Dan helps me edit that first version of the essay and more or less gives me the confidence to pitch it or to ship it.
Isn't that crazy
And
that you have this amazing idea that people completely resonate with, and now you do see so many more people comparing it to a living organism, but at the time you were not seeing anything about it, and you had this original thought that, makes a ton of sense. And it's crazy the fear that you think like, well, people think I'm insane if I post this, but now more and more people are talking about things like that. That's crazy. But it makes sense. I mean, it really, so many people could think of it as a living entity or something they call it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's hard to understand. And so we all bring our own perspectives to Bitcoin. And so if you're a banker, you view it through that lens. If you're biology inclined like I am, I view it through that lens. Right. And so I think that's one of the special things about Bitcoin. There's probably hundreds of essays saying Bitcoin is blank, Bitcoin is Venice, Bitcoin is a living organism, whatever. And I think that's partially indicative of the fact that this thing is wholly new. It is hard to reference. A long time ago, I forgot the guy's name, but he called it a platypus, right? Which is a mammal that lays eggs with poisonous barbs on their leg. They don't have nipples. They produce milk out of their armpits. They have a duck beak. Like, what is this thing? And I think Bitcoin is very similar to that. And so, yeah, this is what happens when humans grapple with a paradigm shift. We struggle to reference it, so we use analogy to explain what it is.
Even
And I
the
think
honey badger.
that's right. The honey badger is a good one. Andreas called it leafcutter ants, or he had imagery of leafcutter ants in one of his books. And that makes sense too. Leafcutter ants they don't really care about themselves as individuals. They're more like a meta species. The group is primary, not the individual. So ants will voluntarily sacrifice their life, not think twice, because it's more of a hive mind type thing. And Bitcoin's similar. It's more like 1 million individuals or more with computer hardware, internet connections, Twitter, whatever. We kind of all together collectively make the network. But the difference is we all make decisions independently in our own local perspective. And the sum total, the aggregate of all those individuals ultimately makes the network. And the fact that it is both software, hardware, and also wetware humans, that creates an interesting dynamic. And what I think Satoshi did really well was he understood human nature to say, if we create a monetary system like this, how will humans respond to it, right? And the most important parts of Bitcoin are not inherently in the protocol. The most important variables emerge out of the social consensus of humans interacting with it, right? 21 million Bitcoin. Okay. There's nothing stopping us from inflating the supply. The only thing stopping us is it's bad for individual Bitcoin holders. So we're not incentivized to hurt ourselves. And so if human nature doesn't change, we can assume that the Bitcoin people will not want to hurt themselves. So we can assume 21 million stays. If it's existential, calculus changes and we can make a change. But I say that because many people think a blockchain is the magic here. There's 5 years of a blockchain, not Bitcoin, all these silly narratives that fundamentally miss what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is not a blockchain. Bitcoin is a series of technologies connected together that produces a set of incentives. Right? There is a blockchain, there's a peer-to-peer network, there's some fancy math and some this and a gossip protocol, right? You add all this stuff up together and that's what Bitcoin is. The Ethereum people thought, let's take the blockchain, put it over here, and then add a rich software layer on top so we can make it do more things. But they're not going to get the same credible monetary policy, resistant to change, unstoppable, censorship resistant stuff. That stuff comes out of the constellation of technologies, not just a blockchain.
Like, just like how you said, we come out of nature, we're part of Bitcoin, but we're not part of Ethereum the same way. Like, this is not the incentive that we have to keep it strong because it doesn't have any of those same qualities. You're right. It wasn't just the software, it's the incentive structure. That's incredible. So that's a really great way to explain it to people. It's so much more. It's hard to, and that's why we use these different analogies, the cyber hornets, like Sailor says. And we wouldn't be incentivized to create more coins unless you said something changes, like, human incentive or something huge. So that's really, and if you have anything more to say about this topic, because I'm just totally cutting you off with my rambling right now.
The only thing I would add is that back to 2018, the biggest risk I saw to Bitcoin, and I think it was consensus at the time, was that the state, okay, if Bitcoin is what we say it is, and it gets big enough, won't the state just stop it? Because it clearly takes power away from central bankers, and that's a large source of power for nation states. And of course, they'll want to stop it. However, two things happened here. One, they were very arrogant at the time. They underestimated Bitcoin. So they essentially allowed it to get too big to actually attack with any sort of success. And at the time, for me personally, I was looking at Bitcoin through the same lens. The state will attack it. And that was the last thing I needed to overcome before I more or less went all in. And seeing Bitcoin through a biological lens, through that mycelial network archetype, which every great extinction event, mycelium rises again, and it's just hard to stop. You cut it in half, now there's two. And that type of thinking led me to believe, okay, well, Bitcoin is built of the same decentralized network archetype. That network archetype is as resilient as anything we've found. And that gives me confidence that Bitcoin is borrowing from already proven strategies. And so trying to attack it will be very tough. And as soon as I got that in the rearview mirror, all in, here we go. And now what's funny is, what is that, 7 years ago, roughly? 7 years ago, the biggest risk was states attacking Bitcoin. Now you look on Twitter, the biggest risk is the states are buying too much Bitcoin and it's going to get captured. So our biggest risk turned into a huge bullish catalyst. It doesn't mean there's not a risk of a honeypot attack or centralizing the supply. That risk is real. But it's funny how the biggest risk is now pushing the price up.
Yeah. And that's why I think so many people talk about that choke point 2.0 and what happened in the last cycle was how, they were jealous, like governments / Wall Street, they didn't have access to these ETFs. And it's almost like, was it an attack? It's just a speculative thing, but was it an attack, just so they can halt it in the meantime to get in on it too? So that's an interesting thought. Yeah, because they were against it. They didn't want it. But even if they don't want it here in the US, other countries have to find an option and they're not going to be able to ban it from the rest of the world. So either you get on board or you can't trade with everybody one day. So it's something you have to take on. And the thing about these, how attacking it doesn't work, even if you have these cycles, how their next my next question is about cycles and collapse and renewal. And it's something that you wrote about with collapse, death, rebirth. So do you think part of the reason why people are scared right now is that they're living through collapse, like a collapse phase, and they just don't realize that rebirth is natural? So it's like part of nature. It's like you have to kind of destroy to rebuild sort of thing. So the way that the Bitcoin cycles go is one of those things, but are you just interested in cycles, or have you always been fascinated by those types of things in nature and then comparing it to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so if we go super zoomed out for a second, we're going through a major social change with or without Bitcoin. So the context we're in, I would use the fourth turning lens as the most effective. Every so often, our institutions start to decay, society starts to slide, and we collectively look around and say, hey, our institutions aren't serving us. Our governments, our monetary system, healthcare, education, media, everything's fraying. And we can survive in that state for a while, but once the pain starts hitting us, we collectively look around and we freak out and we say, hey, we need to fix our institutions because society is coming off the rails. And that's where we are right now. And Bitcoin would be viewed as a change agent as well. It's a source of change, but it serves as an antidote to the uncertainty around us. And so I view Bitcoin as a tool that gives us more certainty in an uncertain world. And the people who cling to it early, yeah, there's more social cost to being an early adopter. And the volatility of Bitcoin is very hard for people to handle. And it wrecks a lot of people. But if you can survive the volatility and you can, simply stay humble and stack sets, you'll be rewarded for that kind of stuff. In terms of cycles in nature versus Bitcoin, I think there's some interesting stuff here, which is that ancient man understood that life was cyclical. We see cycles all around us, the sun, the moon, the moon cycle is a month. The sun cycle is a year, right? These are just embedded into our society. All the religions are more or less a cycle. And so ancient man lived this, they understood it, they embodied it. Modern man, let's say coming out of the Industrial Revolution, saw a very fast technological rise, quality of life increased really rapidly. So we sort of inverted it away from cycles and thought, no, life is all about technology and linear upward trajectory. And we sort of lost sight of reality in our ecology. And I think we're still grappling with that today. And I think that it creates it just creates false sense of expectations around the world. Like we can never go backwards. No, we can absolutely go backwards, and we do often. And so I think it's just healthy to understand that life is cyclical. Everything is cyclical. Your day, a man's testosterone thing is 24 hours. A woman has multiple things in her cycle, right? These are just rhythms of our life. And I think Bitcoin's hype cycle is in a similar way. It follows human psychology. All of a sudden, Bitcoin's quiet for a couple of years, and then it punches through the consciousness and it becomes the most important topic for a short period. Price rips, and then it falls off a cliff. Everyone disappears, everyone leaves, and it just continues to happen like that. And bringing it back to mushrooms quick, I think that adoption cycle, which occurs not only with Bitcoin, this is a human adoption cycle. We come in waves. That's just how we're built. But it mimics mycelium. So most of the time, the mycelial organism, the fungal organism, is underground. You can't see it. It's just doing its thing. And then when conditions are absolutely perfect, temperature, humidity, various different things, that mycelial network concentrates its energy right below the surface, produces a mushroom, and within just a couple days, the mushroom pops out of the ground, drops little spores, which are little mushroom seeds to reproduce, and then that mushroom organism dies down really quickly. Those little spores blow in the wind, they land somewhere else, and if they land in a good spot, they regrow a new mycelial network and the cycle continues. Now, this is similar to Bitcoin's price. Most of the price is flat, boring, no one's talking about it. The Bitcoiners are building, but normal people are blissfully unaware. And then when the conditions are absolutely perfect, the Bitcoin network or the social layer of Bitcoin explodes into consciousness, creates a mushroom or creates a bull market. And very quickly, that mushroom or bull market dies off. But we brought a whole bunch of new people into this thing. And most of them leave, tail between their legs, lost money, whatever. But some of them stick around. They form new little colonies. They go back underground, and the network grows and gets stronger. And then over the bear market, they build and build and build and prepare for the next one, which will be bigger than the last and the last and the last. And so to me, it's just indicative of the fact that We are of nature. The cycles are embedded in our hardwiring, and it just shows up. We're just seeing the score on the price chart, but it's just referencing something deeper and more truthful, which is that that's how we are.
Yeah, I feel like that's exactly what happened. Like these spores were continuing to spread, and I was a spore that landed in 2020, and I decided to join because of the hype and because of all the mushrooms that grew and all that stuff. And then things started to collapse, but then you build, like that's when I started to learn way more about it. And I was more convicted, not because the price went down and I ran away. So it's like the right conditions for the right person and the right reasons, bring you to finding out, understanding why it's different than Ethereum, why it's different than these other coins, and why it's better than our terrible financial system that we have going on right now that's full of theft. So if you reach the right person, yeah, you're like we're all different like Bitcoin spores landing and growing our own, series of, new colonies that spread awareness about it. So, and who would have thought that my journey, I would never thought in a million years that I would land here and have a podcast talking to people like you and trying to have a podcast that's in a way not fully just talking about the finance aspect or talking about the tech aspect, just speaking regularly to people that might be more spores that reach out to others and create new colonies. So that I just want it to be a real regular talk that somebody might come across and be like, wow, that was super interesting. I might want to learn about Bitcoin now.
It's really important, honestly. Um, this thing's weird and it requires some sort of a Trojan horse. You got to somehow sneak these ideas into people's heads because we're taught biologically to avoid the new and weird. We're taught to go with the herd because it's safe. And so any change is hard, and you got to hear the message from someone that you can resonate with. And if you're a software guy, an engineering guy, maybe you don't care about Mycelium of Money or the social aspects. But a lot of people do. In fact, I think more people care about the social impacts and how it impacts normal people than any sort of esoteric technology or esoteric economics. And so to me, I view these cycles, I visualize these cycles where in the beginning, it's a tiny little tight sphere of energy. That sphere is the early adopters, cypherpunks, early libertarians, weirdos on the internet, honestly. And those weirdos on the internet in this tiny little ball have very little surface area with normal people. So the message does not get to normal people. Then you have another hype cycle. Let's just fast forward to 2017. You bring in people with like 1 foot in the matrix and 1 foot out. Those people can decipher the esoteric stuff from the early days, but they're also able to sort of translate that to more mainstream America or mainstream people. And then the sphere gets a little bit bigger. Again, more surface area to interact with normal people. We do another cycle during COVID. Why is the money printer going crazy? We brought in a bunch of boomers who are like, hey, something's wrong here. And again, it just keeps going out wider and wider. And so you're on the outside of a much larger sphere now, translating crazy stuff. Well, maybe this one won't translate to normal
I
people, but
think it would. I really
the
think it
idea.
would. People are interested in the craziest things. Like when you see what people want to watch on the internet, you're just like, oh my God, people want to see crazy stuff. But I think people just, they want to hear interesting ideas. They want to hear different people's perspectives and real talk. Like people, I think when somebody's trying to put on an act, I think they appreciate that authenticity. So I think that's something that people, you never know who might be interested in this. I think a lot more people than you would think would actually actually share it with somebody else and be like, wow, this was a really crazy, interesting talk. Like, how cool. And it taught me something that I had no idea about. So those early people, yes, they're like the freaks on the internet. We all call ourselves weirdos when we understand Bitcoin because we're like that nut job that just, gets it. But it's cool how over time, more people can translate that to everybody else. Because yes, you make more metaphors, you make more simpler ways to describe it instead of getting super deep into the technical stuff, even though I'm nerdy enough where I love that. I'll listen to podcasts all day and absorb it, but then I can spread it to other people in a more digestible way. So that's awesome.
Love it.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask you about, this is something I didn't have on the list, but I added it after I sent you our little bullet points. So it's under the whole like Bitcoin as a soil for new systems. I wanted to ask you about this animated show that I watched called Common Side Effects. And I found it really interesting. It's where a mushroom can cure any sickness, but Big Pharma fights to suppress it because it disrupts their control. And then do you see Bitcoin laying the groundwork for a future where decentralized solutions like that mushroom could change centralized systems like pharmaceuticals or finance? And how this connects Bitcoin's potential to show the show's narrative of a suppressed cure. So it's like this is the cure, like the mushroom was a cure in the show, but it's a way to disrupt like big pharma, just like financial systems. Like I thought it was a really interesting way to compare medical stuff, like the pharmaceutical industry to the finance industry.
Yeah,
But it's a good
absolutely.
show.
I think there's a great parallel there, right? In pharma landscape, if there is a low cost, widely distributed cure, then we don't have to go through the pharma industrial complex to get our white pills from the guy in the white coat. And yeah, we can do it on our own. I think that's true. I think the medical system is really just the pharma system. Pharma is great when you need pharma, but it's not the solution to wellness. Like look at health outcomes. We're clearly not doing it right, and we have more pills than ever. If your incentive is sell pills and surgeries and chemo and whatever, then everything you're going to see everything through that lens. So you don't want to cure people. You want to mask symptoms and have them be a lifetime customer. So the best customer for pharma is a sick child, right? That type of incentive model is going to create poor outcomes, and thinking otherwise is naive. And so yeah, we have to do that all over. I am optimistic about a rise of privatized medicine, wellness, wearables is a similar track. And it sort of is an empowering movement to take health back into our own hands, because the system itself does not provide health for their citizens, which is really sad. I also think this is the first time in human history where we've actually had to be conscious about what we eat. Okay, if you go back 100 years, all food was local, organic, and seasonal. Not because we were like, farmers market, hippie, wellness based Bitcoiners, none of that. It's because that's the only type of food there was. So everyone accidentally had good health outcomes. We also worked outside more, and we had more community, right? So essentially by default, our core biological needs were being satisfied. We didn't have as much material wealth. Okay, fine. But day to day, our bodies were in good health. Today, we have unlimited material wealth relatively, and yet we don't eat proper food. We don't get sunshine. We don't have community. So our meat suit is just screaming at us because we're out of symbiosis with what it needs. And yeah, that's just a whole crazy thing. Like all the people are like, health, what's going on? No, it's all fundamentals. Minimize stress, get sleep, get sun, blah, blah, all the things I mentioned. Now, if we go to Bitcoin, what's going on here? The state would say, maybe rewind a couple years, the state would say this is bad. It threatens our power structure. True. So their instinctive posture is this is bad, demonize it. So you see the IMF, the ECB, whoever writing papers like Bitcoin's bad. And if you track their narratives over time, the phrase like first they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win, or whatever. That all happened with Bitcoin too, right? Now they're saying the latest from the ECB is Bitcoin's going to go up so much that it's going to make too many people rich, and that's not fair, right? They bent the knee to the default conclusion that Bitcoin won, and it's just not fair because they have no arguments left.
And they don't try to say the good thing about it is that it's the system that also, even though there's a limited supply, it's also a system of redistribution of wealth. So at some point, somebody's going to have to use some of their Bitcoin to live their life.
That's right.
If they want to live a good life and be free and travel and do things and actually enjoy what life they have left. So yeah, this does travel to the next people coming into the system. It does get redistributed, and they're just saying no, they're going to hoard it forever and no one's going to be involved in this and they're going to be rich and everyone else. It's like, no, it's just going to spread and level the playing field. But no, don't talk about that part of it. But it's good that they're embracing the fact that they know they can't beat it at this point.
That's right. It's incredible. They're bending the knee in real time. Bitcoiners have been saying it for a long time. No one believed us, but yeah, it's happening.
It's funny because you think sometimes this will one day happen. And even when I started in 2020, it was later than you. I felt like I knew this one day will happen. But I guess when they talk about exponential growth, even though to some it feels like a slow movement, it feels like day to day you think it's not going very fast and you're like, why I want this to be $1 million tomorrow, but it really is moving very fast when you see things like this happening. I didn't think it would be within the 4 years that since I learned about it, but it's going quick, and I think the adoption just accelerates after that, so it's not going to slow down.
100%. I think we're going through an S curve, and what that means is it's really steep in the beginning and then it levels out and then it's really steep again, and then it levels out. And I think we're entering the second steep adoption part, and it just takes time for humans to understand this thing, put it in context, start to adopt it. Just like any individual, you start small, you shun it the first couple of times, it finally clicks, and then you're realizing that you need to own more of this thing. And that's just happening for everyone in institutions, individuals all around the world. And at a certain point, enough people realize that it's important. And then there's going to be another mega mania phase, or whatever you want to call that, hype cycle. And I do expect that. I don't think that's happened yet, the second big one.
No.
People call it gradually, then suddenly. Parker Lewis popularized that. And I think that's the world we're living in. And then one final point is that Bitcoin hasn't changed very much in 15 years. But the world around Bitcoin has changed a lot. And so anytime, let's take the COVID mania phase, print a bunch of money, lockdowns, you all of a sudden realize that humans are susceptible to propaganda. We're willing to just do whatever the state says and give up all liberties in the name of freedom or in the name of safety, which deeply saddens me. But that's the reality we're in. However, at the same time, all those negative things happening from the state and money printers, etc., that leads people to look around and say, what's going on here? And they start looking for a solution. Enter Michael Saylor, right? He's seeing his financial reality, which is not good, forces him to go out in the market and find a solution. He finds Bitcoin. Now he's the largest holder in the world, probably be the richest man ever when it's all said and done. And that same thing happens with individuals. So as the world around us becomes more volatile, which I expect for another 5-10 years, probably, maybe less, but probably in that range, more and more and more people are going to continually find Bitcoin due to necessity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I think even if the US wasn't on board, the rest of the world had a necessity to do so. They didn't really have choice. Companies like Michael Saylor's had to find an option or retire and just give up, so it's like you have to, that whole need to know basis. And as far as those cycles, when I learned about exponential growth and Jeff Booth and all those talks, about folding a piece of paper to the moon, I also like to think about it in a way where you say it's an S curve. It reminds me of a ribbon or like even a spiral, like all the patterns in nature, how you have a spiral starting off really tiny and bigger and bigger. And just like how you said, that grows bigger and reaches more people every time, like how, different people that spores that join the network, reach a different footprint of more people. But it's like that spiral. It's not like it's a bigger circle around the spiral every time that spiral grows. So it's kind of that nature. Like if Bitcoin is nature, it's, yeah. So that's the way I look at the S curve as being a coiling ribbon, but also a bigger, kind of ribbon that's expanding outward. And it's like those little circles in the middle are super tiny, just like those people that started off.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's right. It is an upward trajectory spiral. That's a better way to look at the cycles. I also think we're probably at the end of cycles, right? For 3 cycles in a row every 4 years after the halving, we pump, then we go back down. And I think that was always going to end at some point because the supply implications have less of an effect over time. In the first 4 years, half of the supply came out. Next 4 years, 25% of the total supply came out, and then it keeps getting cut in half. And so the halving has less of an impact on the market each time. And so if we define the cycle based on halving metrics, that will be decline over time. At the same time, maybe there never was a supply dynamic halving induced cycle, and really all it was 3 data points, and they were all correlated to money supply growth. And so the number one correlation for Bitcoin by far is M2 money growth. How much liquidity is flooding the market equals Bitcoin benefiting. And so either way, cycle theories appear to be dead.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we won't have extreme market volatility, but I don't think we should count on these consistent patterns.
Right. And I think even if it is a consistent pattern of sorts over time, it'll just up, like and yes, we'll have like always like movement. And I think volatility is, vitality, because people will leverage trade this thing forever. But it's, I think it's what it is, also another nature type based cycle thing that's a rebirth. It reminds me of birth pains. Like, how a woman goes into labor and they get closer and closer and closer. So it's like this new system is giving birth. It's going to come out, and be the new whatever child, I don't know how you want to describe it, but I just think of it as the cycles being birth pains. So it's like, you start off like 5 minutes apart, then you go to 2 minutes apart. So if we have these cycle upturns, they'll probably start to be every like 1 year, every 6 months, every 3 months, there'll be like some, new all-time high. So I think it's like birth pains. And then it's like to the point where the child is born and then it's like, now it's here, it's like, it's not going through those pains anymore. And then so I love to connect cycles to things like joining the world. Like it's like giving birth to Bitcoin. I don't know. It's just crazy to think of it that way. Crazy.
Love it.
So what I wanted to ask you was, has Bitcoin changed how you view nature? Or is it like, did you always just see nature and then you connect to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so let's see. I've always been like computer nerd. I've always had a lot of interest. I was an athlete who was a semi-pro bass fisherman who was into nerdy computer stuff, who was also very interested in the outdoors. And so I came with a diverse background, but pre-Bitcoin, I was way more into ecology. That came first, I should say. So, started with camping, fishing, hiking, then turned into added foraging to that list. And so probably 7 years of pretty consistent mushroom foraging and learning about that world prior to Bitcoin. And so I just ported over that framework to see Bitcoin. Has my view of nature changed since finding Bitcoin? I think that the meta stuff that changed for me is that I view technology through sort of a Kevin Kelly lens. And Kevin Kelly views technology as an ecology, and he views it as like organisms evolving. If you need to hit something, right, you could pound a rudimentary wooden nail with a rock, right? And then a rock becomes a rock on top of a handle, which becomes a hammer, which becomes a sledgehammer, which becomes a hydraulic press in the Industrial Revolution, which becomes a rolling, like a asphalt smoothing out the pavement thing, right? It's the same idea, but evolves and fractures into new use cases. Just came up with a rudimentary example there, but the
It
idea
was
is that
perfect.
technology evolves and it is more like a living organism, and things appear when we need them and then we build them, but they're related and there's a taxonomy of these technologies. Okay, so that's kind of how I view technology. That came after Bitcoin because of discovering Kevin Kelly. And what's very funny is people give me, I'll say, too much credit for viewing Bitcoin as a living organism. Then I go reread all Kevin Kelly's books after writing my essays, and I realize that really I'm just repurposing Kevin Kelly's ideas in a Bitcoin lens. And I did not, in fact, come up with much new innovation.
You're a spore then.
We all are. That's the takeaway, is that I think people, let's see, I don't think people have technologies or people create technologies. I think technologies have people. And what I mean by that is like the conditions are ripe for Bitcoin to exist because of cypherpunks viewing a totalitarian future if we all go to digital and trying to create tools to prevent that. Then you have financial collapse in 2001, 2008. Okay, the money is screwed up, right? So the conditions for Bitcoin were ripe. And then it ended up being Satoshi that birthed the idea, but it didn't have to be Satoshi. In the same way, if you look out through history, like the invention of gunpowder or the invention of all these like revolutionary technologies, if you look throughout history, one school of thought would say, we wouldn't have had it if it wasn't for the person credited for the invention. The other school of this theory would say, no, 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 someone gets credit for it, but we were going to invent that within a year or two of that time period, no matter what. And I don't think it's an either or, but I'm much more on the side of technologies emerge when the conditions are ripe. And it doesn't necessarily matter who creates it, because we were all getting close there. Is it because we have a connected consciousness? Is it just because we're solving problems? I don't know the answer. But
Well,
either way, it emerges out of society as I
I
see
was
it.
coincidentally, I was listening to a speaker today who he's like just like an inspirational kind of speaking person. And I just came across a video that he was talking about ripples and like energy. And it reminds me of even when I was talking to one Bitcoiner recently, I called her the pebble. Like she was the first pebble that created a ripple that came through me. And she told me that she wasn't the first pebble. So it reminds me of you too, saying you weren't the first pebble when it came to this idea, but the ripple came toward you and now you're spreading it out. But this person I was listening to was talking about ripples, and that's also a natural thing. Like you throw a pebble into water and you see it spread out. But he was saying that the reflection, or the way the ripples ripple out through a pond, it's like that vibration comes back. So it's like people are there thinking these things and these thoughts are going out. So yeah, somehow or another, it is all in the same pond. It's all connected somehow. So I just thought that was cool that I just listened to it today and just like connected those thoughts for me with what you
That's
just said.
awesome. Yeah, I think the key point is that I don't know if there's a metaphysical fabric that connects everyone. I probably would lean towards that being true, even if we can't prove it yet.
Especially
But
if you saw the ant face guy or whatever kind of, you
yeah,
know.
those things help. At least end of one, they help. But I also think it doesn't really matter if it's that or it's just incentives in our local environment and we solve problems and it just appears that we're connected. Either way, it appears that we're connected, so we should operate as if we are.
Right. That's exactly right. So, as far as a lot of people feeling overwhelmed today with seeing all this corruption, seeing Doge, seeing the way that things just seem to be collapsing and fear everywhere, what would you say to someone who's stuck between those feelings of the old world collapsing and like trying to be open to change into the future?
Yeah, first I would say I'm empathetic to that point of view. The world is crazy, and in our modern 24/7 connected world, we're able to digest calamities that happen anywhere on the world in real time. And I think the first principle to take away is that we're not built for that. And so if the internet is messing with you, which it messes with me and most others, you should examine your relationship to doom scrolling and do less because it does affect us because we're genuinely not capable of handling it, right? Our hardwiring is built from a world where we're in hunter-gatherer tribes of 150 or less. If you see the guy next to you hunting mammoths better than you feel bad and you want to contribute and you have a negative feeling, so you hopefully overcome and go figure out a way to outcompete your neighbor. That's a positive emotional catalyst and stimulus. Today, people getting blown up in the Middle East, we have that same bad feeling, but we can't do anything about it. And it's just too much for us to bear. And so essentially it hijacks our ancient hardwiring in a way that's not productive for us. So step one is realize that you're playing in a game that you're not suited for. So you have to be conscious in how you interact with the world today in order to maintain some internal peace and sanity. Next, I feel extremely optimistic about the future more than ever in my life, but that wasn't always the case. I remember distinctly in 2020 or 2021, all this stuff's going crazy. I'm disenchanted with the world. I thought we had more spying. Why is my neighbor calling the cops on my other neighbor for too many cars in the driveway on Christmas? Right. And I was sort of, I don't want to say depressed, manic, depressed, neurotic, whatever, just trying to make sense of the world and not feeling very grounded. I'm working out. I was living in Minneapolis at the time. I was working out in a city park, like walk from my house. There's a literal playground, no school, nothing. So I'm like doing pull-ups on a kid's monkey bars sit up, headphones on, just working out like a normal day. And I was listening to John Vallis's podcast. He did a series, he calls them Hodl Hang, with Breedlove, Hodl, Eric Kaysen, that crew. And in that experience, I distinctly remember the switch flipping where I went from chaotic world, uncertainty, I internalized that, I have the same state, to a world of, wait a minute, if the worst case scenario happens and I have to fly my family on the next flight to El Salvador with Bitcoin in tow, I'm going to be fine. I can bring my family down later. We'll just build a jungle compound in Costa Rica and everyone I love will be okay. And it sort of gave me this confidence primarily through Bitcoin, number one, as in like financial asset to protect myself, but also Bitcoin community being a decentralized network of people that are best suited to weather the storm. So finances plus the network, okay, I'm totally fine. So then what am I worried about today when I know I have a secure backup plan through those two channels? And then all of a sudden, the anxiety of the exterior world melted away, and I have an internal sense of confidence and balance that myself and mine are okay. And so, what I would say is try to turn off the external stimulus. Don't let it bother you. Plan out worst case scenario. Do you feel comfortable with that? If yes, then you should just go about your day with optimism. And also, no one's effective if you're neurotic. You just self-sabotage. So you need to get that stuff behind you and have a clear head so that you can be effective in this world. And in a world where pessimism is the norm, that's all the more reason to be optimistic, right? Related parallels, people are like, why, how could you reproduce now? The world's crazy. Oh man, climate, blah, blah. No, the exact opposite is true. The best people among us need to work harder now and reproduce more now so that we can build a better world.
When you look at a community like Bitcoin, and when you're talked about, my backup plan would be, okay, I've been saving in Bitcoin. I could go to El Salvador, I could go to Costa Rica and just like live, in nature and just enjoy my life and just we'll be fine no matter what. Like you just might have to let go of your comforts of your life that you're in, your habits and your, things that make you feel safe, but starting something new is okay, But also when you look at communities like people that are into Bitcoin and they're not just trading Bitcoin, they actually understand what it is. There is a common theme of health, people taking care of their bodies because they know that they have hope for a better future. They're not sitting there depressed in a terrible state, hurting themselves because they're struggling to work every day and not seeing any sort of moves as far as saving money or looking like they have any sort of plan for the future. So it's like when you actually discover Bitcoin and you know there's hope for the future, you start taking care of yourself, you actually are happier, you actually stop paying attention to the world around you because you know that you start to realize that there's so many lies and so many, like the way media tries to keep you in this fear-based system, so when you escape that system and you decide you're going to opt out and find out about why money is broken and why Bitcoin is better, you see that other Bitcoiners are happy people. So it just makes you want to join that world. It's definitely a place that you would want to be. So it's hopefully we can spread that message out to more people and help them because it is a scary place. And if I didn't have Bitcoin, or if you knew you didn't have Bitcoin, we probably would be feeling pretty bad. You know what I mean? Not like worrying about the future, worrying about having more kids, but because we have that, we have hope, so it's very important to tell people that yes, tune out all that noise and try to have a backup plan. And that backup plan is Bitcoin.
Well said. Absolutely right. And one point on orange pilling people, it doesn't work to yell at someone and tell them what to think,
Right.
but humans are keenly aware of the state, the aura, the vibe, the whatever. And so if you embody that optimism, your peers will notice, and all of a sudden the questions won't be, it won't be you trying to ram Bitcoin down their throat. It'll be them trying to get in your orbit because they observe something that they want. Even if they don't associate it with Bitcoin, they'd probably be resistant to the fact that Bitcoin was a large part of the story, but it is. And the first question is saying, that's someone I want to be like or be around. And then you can start to uncover why.
I love that because and that's why it's so cool to talk to people that actually get it, because when you talked about each sphere growing bigger and every person having a footprint inside and outside that world, and it's almost like you reach your hand out and grab more of those people, like, because not that you're grabbing them to force them, but if you're like this orb of hope or like that aura that people want to be part of, they're just like trying to get in, and you're just like you're like giving them a helping hand and you're bringing them in, and then your orb gets bigger with all the people that you suck in. I don't know, like what, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's kind of like the way that I visualize it, which is really cool. So that's the fun part about talking to Bitcoiners. You can kind of see what's happening in your mind in a artistic way. So it's really, really nice. So feel like we can talk about all sorts of stuff. And if you ever want to come back again and talk, it's just fun to talk to Bitcoiners. So I had a really great time talking with you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I will tag you in it when I post it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Staci. I really appreciate the time. It was a fun chat.
Awesome. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
All right. Take care.